When the mourners left and the house grew quiet, Elaine finally allowed herself to collapse into the silence. For 3 days she had played the grieving widow, answering condolences with a numb smile, accepting casseroles she would never eat, and enduring the gentle pats on her shoulder from people who had no idea how fractured she already was inside. Thomas was gone. 20 years of marriage ended with the closing of a coffin lid, and now all that remained were memories that felt brittle and unfinished. She spent the first night alone in their bedroom staring at the ceiling, expecting his voice to call her name from the hallway, expecting the sound of his keys in the front door, expecting the rhythm of his breath in the dark. None of it came. On the second night, she began to wander through his belongings, not with intention, but with that strange compulsion grief brings, the need to touch everything, as if the objects themselves still carried the warmth of the person. She opened drawers, traced her fingers over shirts folded with military precision, and lingered on the faint scent of his cologne. By the third day, she found the box. It was buried beneath sweaters at the back of the closet, an old leather case with brass latches, heavy and unassuming. She might have ignored it, but curiosity pierced through the fog of mourning. She carried it to the bed, set it on her lap, and clicked the latches open. Inside was a notebook. Worn, with a cracked spine, its cover smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. She expected old business notes or financial records. Thomas had always been meticulous, but as she flipped open the first page, her heart tightened. It wasn't a ledger. It was a journal. And on the very first line, for her, always, "You are the reason I kept living." Elaine froze. The handwriting was unmistakably his, neat and deliberate, the same script she had seen on grocery lists and birthday cards. But the words weren't for her. She read on, trembling. Each page unfolded like a letter, filled with tenderness and devotion for a woman unnamed, but clearly not his wife. "Your laugh is the only sound that steadies me. The nights we shared are the truest I've ever known." The phrases were raw, unguarded, nothing like the measured tone he had used with Elaine. Her chest tightened, her stomach churned. She flipped further, her eyes scanning hungrily and with horror. The journal chronicled years of a secret relationship. Notes about meetings, fragments of conversations, even poems scribbled in the margins. Each line was a betrayal, yet written with such passion that Elaine could not stop herself from reading. And then came the entry that broke her open. "If anything happens to me, give this to her. She deserves to know I never stopped choosing her." Elaine's breath caught. The request was clear. This journal was never meant for her hands. It was meant for the other woman, whoever she was. Her hands shook as she clutched it, the weight of it unbearable. She felt sick, but she also felt something worse than betrayal. She felt invisible, as though the 20 years she had spent as Thomas's wife were a performance staged while his heart belonged elsewhere. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen with the journal open in front of her, rereading passages until the words blurred. Anger flared, then grief, then an almost masochistic longing for Thomas's voice, even if it had been speaking to someone else. She slammed the book shut more than once, swore she would burn it, but each time she found herself opening it again, pulled back by the need to understand. By dawn, a new terror surfaced. What if the other woman already knew? What if she came forward, demanding her share of Thomas's life, maybe even his estate? The will had left everything to Elaine, but the journal was a weapon, proof of infidelity, of promises made to someone else. She pictured strangers whispering, her friends turning their eyes away, her son questioning his father's memory. She clutched the book tighter, her pulse pounding. There were names, half concealed, initials in the margins, fragments that hinted at meetings in small cafes, in motel rooms just outside town. Enough clues for someone determined to piece it together. Elaine felt the walls of the house close in. For years she had thought of herself as Thomas's anchor, his partner, his home. Now she wondered if she had been nothing but a shadow while someone else basked in his light. And yet, beneath the fury, beneath the betrayal, was a strange pang of envy. Whoever this woman was, she had known a Thomas Elaine had never seen. Passionate, poetic, reckless with love. Elaine found herself whispering aloud in the kitchen. "Who were you? Who were you to him?" The question lingered, echoing through the empty house. By the end of that first week, Elaine knew two things with certainty. She could not destroy the journal, and she could not keep it forever. Thomas had written it for someone, had entrusted it with a purpose, and now that responsibility had fallen into her unwilling hands. Whether she honored his wish or buried it would shape the rest of her life. She pressed her palms to the cracked cover, tears stinging her eyes, and whispered into the silence. "Why did you do this to me, Thomas? Why now, when I can't even scream at you for it?" The journal sat heavy in her lap, a relic of a love that was not hers, a secret she had inherited like a curse. Somewhere out there, another woman was waiting, perhaps grieving, perhaps still alive with the fire Thomas had left behind. And Elaine, widow, wife, betrayed partner, would have to decide whether to find her or let the secret die with him. Elaine tried to bury the journal under piles of laundry, as though cotton and fabric could smother the words, but it was no use. Every time she walked past the closet, she felt its presence pressing against her. By the second week, she could no longer keep it shut away. She read it again, slower this time, hunting for details she had skimmed before. The handwriting revealed a man she barely knew. The entries were vivid, sometimes even reckless, as if Thomas had written with no fear of discovery. There were dates, places, mentions of a hotel by the river, of long walks near the old mill outside town. He even described arguments, jealousy, secrecy, promises that one day he would set it all right. Each new detail clawed at her sanity. The more she read, the less she trusted her own memories. Had Thomas been with the other woman the night he told Elaine he was working late? Had those weekend trips he took for business been trysts instead? She had laughed at herself for suspecting once or twice over the years. He had always brushed her doubts aside with a smile, a kiss on the cheek, and she, foolish, desperate to believe, had let him. Now she knew better. Yet knowledge did not bring peace, it brought fire. She started searching their old bank statements. She pulled out his phone records from boxes of bills. The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight. Unfamiliar charges, calls to numbers not in his contact list, transactions at places she had never been. The realization sent her spiraling. She wanted to scream, to shatter dishes against the wall, to demand answers from a man already buried beneath 6 feet of dirt. Instead, she turned her anger outward. If Thomas had betrayed her, then the woman was complicit. Whoever she was, she had stolen years, had taken what belonged to Elaine by marriage, by vows, by sacrifice. On the third night of her search, Elaine scribbled every clue she found onto a sheet of paper. Initials, places, vague descriptions. One set of initials appeared again and again, M.L. She didn't know the name, but it repeated enough to matter. She circled it in red ink, her hand shaking. She should have stopped. She should have burned the journal and the notes and pretended none of it existed. But the hunger for truth was stronger than her fear. The next morning, she drove to the old mill mentioned in the journal. It was abandoned, weeds choking the path, graffiti on the walls. Still, she wandered the grounds, half expecting to find a carved heart with initials hidden in the bricks. There was nothing, just silence, just decay. Yet standing there, she felt a strange connection, as if she were walking through her husband's secret life, trespassing on a history that was never hers. Days blurred into one another. Elaine became consumed. She skipped meals, ignored calls from friends checking in, stopped answering her son's messages. She couldn't tell him. How could she tell him that his father, the man he had admired, had been unfaithful for years? Instead, she locked herself inside the house with the journal, becoming its prisoner. And then came the knock at the door. It was a woman mid-50s, with sharp eyes and a cautious smile. Elaine didn't recognize her. "You don't know me," the woman said softly. "But I knew Thomas. We met years ago. I wanted to pay my respects." Elaine's heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself to nod, to keep her face blank, though her fingers twitched at her side. "I'm sorry," Elaine managed. "It's been a difficult time." The woman's gaze lingered, as if weighing whether to say more. Then she pressed her lips into a thin line and stepped back. "He was a good man," she said, and left without giving her name. Elaine shut the door and leaned against it, trembling. Was that her? Was that ML? The possibility left her both terrified and electrified. The walls seemed to whisper, urging her forward. That night, she dreamt of her husband's voice calling another woman's name. She woke drenched in sweat, Her nails dug into her palms. The following week brought worse. At the grocery store, she overheard two women whispering. "Did you hear about Thomas? Someone said he was seen with another woman before he died." Elaine froze by the apples, her breath shallow. Rumors. Already, the world was catching wind of the secret. She drove home in a daze, panic swirling in her chest. If the journal ever came to light, her husband's reputation would crumble, and with it, her own. But fear alone could not stop her now. That night, she returned to the journal, searching again for the initials. And this time, she noticed something she had missed before. A phone number scribbled in the margin of one entry, half-faded but still legible. Her pulse thundered as she copied it down. For hours she sat staring at her phone, debating. To call would mean stepping fully into the fire. To stay silent would mean suffocating under the weight of questions she couldn't answer. At midnight, she dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a woman's voice, weary but steady. "Hello." Elaine froze, the breath trapped in her throat. She ended the call without speaking, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. But the sound of that voice clung to her. She knew, without proof, that it belonged to her. The other woman was alive. Real. Reachable. And now, Elaine had crossed a line she could never uncross. Elaine didn't sleep after that call. She sat on the edge of her bed, her phone clutched in her hand, staring at the dark screen as if it might glow with answers. The woman's voice, measured, calm, achingly familiar in a way she couldn't explain, rattled around her skull. When the first rays of light slipped through the blinds, Elaine still hadn't moved. The journal lay open on her lap, the inked initials M.L. circled so many times the paper had nearly torn. By noon, she knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. Her son, Daniel, stopped by to check on her. He found her in the kitchen, hunched over the journal with bloodshot eyes. "Mom," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You look awful. Are you even eating?" Elaine flinched. She had planned to hide the journal from him, but exhaustion made her careless. Daniel's eyes dropped to the pages, and before she could snap the book shut, he had seen. "What's this?" he asked, his voice sharp. She swallowed hard, debating denial, but something inside her broke. "It's your father's," she whispered. "His journal. And it isn't what you think." Daniel read a few lines, his brow furrowing deeper with each sentence. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "Are you telling me Dad was cheating on you? On us?" Elaine wanted to say no, to shield him, but the words stuck in her throat. Her silence was enough. Daniel slammed the journal shut and pushed it away. "Jesus, Mom. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I couldn't," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I didn't want you to hate him. To hate me. I thought maybe it was just my imagination, but then I found more." Daniel stood there, torn between anger and confusion. Finally, he sat down, rubbing his temples. "So what now? Do you want to find her?" Elaine hesitated, then nodded. "I think she already found me." She told him about the mysterious woman who had come to the house, about the phone call. Daniel's jaw tightened. "If she's still out there, we can track her down. Whoever she is, she doesn't get to just walk away after wrecking our family." For the first time, Elaine felt less alone. Her son wasn't turning from her. He was stepping into the fire with her. They began digging together, Daniel using his contacts from work, Elaine scouring through old boxes of Thomas's belongings. They discovered receipts for a storage unit, paid in cash for nearly 10 years. The unit was still active. 2 days later, they went together. The place was dusty and stale, stacked with boxes labeled in Thomas's handwriting. Opening them felt like opening a coffin. Inside were photographs, receipts, trinkets, evidence of a second life. Elaine lifted a framed picture and froze. It was Thomas, smiling easily in a way he rarely had with her, his arm draped around a woman whose face had been burned out of the photo with a lighter. Her heart pounded. Even destroyed, the picture told her everything. Thomas had treasured someone enough to keep their photo, then hated them enough to scorch their identity. "Mom," Daniel whispered, holding up a bundle of letters tied with string. The handwriting wasn't Thomas's. The loops were softer, more delicate. Elaine untied the bundle with shaking hands. The letters were signed with the same initials, M.L. The words inside weren't declarations of love, they were confessions. Apologies for secrets kept, fear of what others might say, promises that one day the truth will come out. In 1 M. L. wrote, I never wanted to hurt her, but you said she would never know. Elaine's chest tightened. Her. That meant Elaine herself. She reread the line over and over until the paper blurred. This wasn't just an affair. There was something bigger beneath it, something her husband and this woman had conspired to hide. Daniel rifled through the box and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a birth certificate, dated 28 years ago. His hands trembled as he handed it to his mother. Elaine unfolded the paper and froze. It was for a baby girl. Father, Thomas Wright. Mother, M.L. Her world tilted. Thomas hadn't just cheated. He had a child. A daughter, hidden away for decades. Daniel cursed under his breath, pacing the room. So I have a sister out there? A sister he never told us about? Elaine's throat closed. Rage and grief twisted inside her like barbed wire. A daughter. A living, breathing reminder of his betrayal. All these years, while she cooked his meals, raised their son, stayed faithful through the lean times, he had carried this secret life. The discovery left her reeling, but Daniel's reaction was fire. We have to find her, he said fiercely. If Dad kept her hidden, there's a reason. Maybe she doesn't even know about us. Elaine's instinct was to recoil. She didn't want to meet this girl, this stranger who carried her husband's blood. But Daniel's determination cut through her hesitation. He had lost faith in his father, but now he seemed desperate to salvage something from the wreckage. That night, as she lay awake, Elaine felt the house groaning with silence around her. The journal lay on the nightstand, but she didn't open it. She stared at the ceiling, haunted by the burned photograph, the confessions, the birth certificate. The betrayal was larger than she could have imagined, and yet the mystery only deepened. Who was the daughter? Did she know about her father? About Elaine? And why had Thomas kept it buried until death forced the truth into the light? The journal no longer felt like a curse alone. It was a map, and maps demanded to be followed, even if they led straight into hell. Elaine could no longer recognize herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes rimmed with red, her lips pressed thin as though words themselves had become dangerous to speak aloud. The journal lay permanently on the kitchen table now, its pages splayed open like an unhealed wound, and she hovered over it daily, as if it might suddenly offer forgiveness or an explanation. Daniel, once fiery in his determination, had started to distance himself. He still answered her calls, still came by occasionally, but she noticed the unease in his eyes. He wanted answers, yes, but he didn't want to drown in them the way she had. The day he told her he needed space, she felt the floor give way beneath her. Mom, I can't live in the past like this, he said. If you want to keep chasing ghosts, fine, but don't drag me down with you. His words cut deeper than any betrayal Thomas had left behind. Elaine sat in silence after he slammed the door, her body trembling as she clutched the burned photograph she had found in the storage unit. She stared at the missing face, that blackened blur of ash and spite, and felt a hatred so strong it nearly choked her. Whoever M.L. was, she had ruined everything. Her marriage, her son's faith in his father, her sanity. That night, Elaine poured herself a glass of wine, then another, trying to numb the ache, but the journal still called to her, whispering through the ink. She flipped through it again, searching for something she might have missed, something that could give her control over the chaos. And then she saw it, an entry near the end, one she had skimmed but never truly read. Thomas had written about regret, about fear of his secret daughter being used after his death. If they ever find her, they'll destroy her, he wrote. But she deserves the truth. She deserves more than I gave her. Elaine slammed the book shut, her breath ragged. The truth was a weapon, and she held it now. She could bury it, protect what little dignity her husband had left, or she could unleash it and watch every lie unravel in flames. The choice pressed down on her like a weight she could barely carry. The following week brought her lowest point. Rumors had begun to spread, neighbors whispering, church acquaintances avoiding eye contact. Someone must have talked, or perhaps her desperate calls to the number in the journal had left traces. A letter even arrived in the mail, and signed, with only a single sentence scrawled across the page. You don't want to know her. Elaine's hands shook so violently she nearly tore the paper in half. She locked every door and window that night, pacing the house with her husband's old baseball bat clutched in her fists, convinced shadows were watching her from the yard. Sleep became impossible. Food turned to ash in her mouth. The walls seemed to close in tighter every day, pressing her into a corner where only the journal existed. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, Daniel stopped returning her messages altogether. His silence was louder than shouting. He was her only ally, and now she had lost him too. Elaine broke down on the kitchen floor, the journal clutched to her chest as sobs racked her body. She cursed Thomas, cursed M.L., cursed the daughter she had never met. She even cursed herself for being too weak to let go. But even in her grief, a darker thought grew. What if Thomas was right? What if finding the girl would only bring more ruin? What if the woman she hated, the faceless M.L., had left that warning letter herself? Perhaps they were watching already, waiting for Elaine to slip further, waiting for her to expose them. The collapse came not with one shattering blow, but with 1,000 small cuts, each day bleeding her thinner. She stopped answering the phone. She stopped drawing the curtains. She stopped being Elaine and became instead a hollow figure circling the same truths over and over. The journal was her Bible and her curse, and though she wanted desperately to burn it, she could never strike the match. Because in its pages was her only connection to Thomas, the real Thomas, the man she both loved and despised. And if she destroyed it, she would lose him forever, lies and all. On the 50th night since discovering the journal, Elaine sat in the dark, a single candle flickering, the burned photograph in one hand and the warning letter in the other. She whispered to the empty room, "What do you want from me? What am I supposed to do?" But no answer came, only the faint hiss of the candle as wax dripped down. She realized then that she had reached the bottom. Her allies gone, her son estranged, her mind frayed to threads. All she had left was a choice that felt more like a trap: protect the secret and let it rot her alive, or drag the truth screaming into daylight and face whatever consequences followed. For the first time since Thomas's death, Elaine no longer feared the collapse. It had already happened. The question now was what she would do with the ruins. Elaine's breaking point arrived on a gray Sunday morning when the house felt colder than usual, the silence too heavy to bear. She sat at the kitchen table with the journal open before her, the letters from M.L. spread out like evidence in a trial, and the burned photograph staring back at her with its ghostly absence. For days she had debated burning it all, destroying every trace. But that morning she felt something shift. Fear had given way to fury, exhaustion to resolve. If her husband had built a second life, if he had a daughter hidden away, then Elaine would drag that truth into the light whether it killed her or not. She picked up the phone and dialed the number again, the one scrawled in the margin of the journal. This time she didn't hang up. "Hello." The same voice answered, calm, steady. Elaine's hand shook, but her voice came out sharp. "This is Elaine Wright, Thomas's wife. I know who you are." A silence followed, thick and loaded, then a sigh. "I was wondering when you'd call again," the woman said. "We need to talk." They met 2 nights later at a diner on the edge of town. Elaine arrived early, her stomach knotted, her palms damp. When the door finally opened, the woman walked in as though she had done it 100 times before. Tall, composed, her hair streaked with gray, but her features strikingly sharp. She slid into the booth without hesitation. "My name is Margaret," she said quietly. "Margaret Lane." Elaine's pulse quickened. M.L. At last, the faceless figure from the journal had flesh and bone. Margaret's eyes held no guilt, no apology, only a weary sadness that made Elaine's skin crawl. "How long?" Elaine demanded, gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Years," Margaret replied softly. "Longer than you want to hear. But it wasn't about taking him from you. It was about what we had together and what came from it." Elaine's chest tightened. "The child," she said flatly. Margaret nodded once. "Her name is Rachel. She's 28 now. She doesn't know the full story. She knows Thomas was her father, but she doesn't know about you, about Daniel, about the lies that tied us all together." Elaine's breath hitched. 28. Just a year younger than Daniel. The betrayal deepened, sharper than any knife. "You should have stayed away," she hissed. "You should have left us alone." Margaret didn't flinch. "I tried. But Thomas came back to me, again and again. He couldn't let go. And when he died, I knew this day would come." Elaine slammed her hand on the table, the silverware rattling. Why now? Why show yourself to me? Why leave letters, photographs, pieces of him that tore everything apart? Margaret leaned forward, her voice low. Because he wanted you to know. Because he was a coward in life and couldn't face you with the truth, so he left it behind for you to uncover. And because Rachel deserves to know her family. Rage boiled in Elaine's veins. She is not my family. Margaret's expression hardened. She's your husband's daughter. That makes her part of this whether you like it or not. The words hung between them like a noose. Elaine stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the tile. You've already taken enough from me. You won't take what's left. She stormed out of the diner, her heart pounding, tears blinding her. But Margaret's words echoed relentlessly. Rachel deserves to know her family. That night, Elaine sat alone with the journal, replaying every entry, every hidden truth. Daniel's silence weighed on her like a stone, but she knew she couldn't hide from him forever. The next day she called him and begged him to come. When he finally arrived, she handed him the birth certificate, the letters, everything. His face went pale as he read, his hands trembling. So it's true, he whispered. I have a sister. Elaine's voice cracked. She's not your sister. She's a mistake. But Daniel shook his head, his eyes blazing. No, she's blood. She didn't choose this, Dad did. If you hate him, fine. But don't punish her for existing. The words cut Elaine deeper than she expected. For years she had lived as the faithful wife, the loyal mother, the protector of their family's image. Now her own son stood against her, defending the child of betrayal. You would choose her over me? Elaine asked, her voice trembling. Daniel's gaze softened, but his words were firm. I'm not choosing sides. I just want the truth. I want to meet her. Elaine's world cracked wide open. The very thing she feared most was happening. Her son slipping away, pulled by the blood tie of another woman's child. In desperation, she lashed out. If you walk out that door to find her, don't bother coming back. Silence fell heavy between them. Daniel stared at her, heartbreak etched into every line of his face. Then he turned, walked to the door, and left without another word. Elaine collapsed to the floor, the journal falling beside her, its pages fluttering like wings of a dying bird. The house felt emptier than ever, the air heavy with finality. For hours she lay there, staring at the ceiling, numb. When night came, she rose slowly, lit a match, and held it above the journal. Flames licked the edges, curling the paper, erasing ink with orange light. But just as the fire spread, she panicked and smothered it, saving what remained. She couldn't let go. Not yet. Because in those ashes lay both her curse and her last connection to Thomas. And tomorrow, she knew, she would have to face the choice she had avoided for weeks. Destroy the truth and live with silence. Or confront Rachel, the daughter who embodied everything she had lost. The climax had arrived, and there was no turning back. Elaine waited 3 days before she made her decision. The house was silent, Daniel still absent, his phone calls unanswered, his loyalty torn between the mother who had raised him and the ghost of a father who had deceived them both. She moved through the rooms like a shadow, touching the furniture, the photographs on the walls, as if seeking proof that her life had been real, that the years with Thomas had not been a cruel fabrication. But the journal remained on the table, its scorched edges from her failed attempt at burning it mocking her resolve. In the stillness of that third night, she packed the journal, the letters, and the burned photograph into a box and drove across town to the diner where she had last seen Margaret. Margaret was already there, as though she had been waiting, her eyes calm but searching. You came, Margaret said quietly. Elaine slid the box across the table, her jaw tight. I don't want this anymore. If it belongs to anyone, it belongs to her. To Rachel. Margaret studied her face, seeing both fury and exhaustion in her features. You don't have to do this, she said gently. Elaine's voice was hoarse. I don't have to, but I can't live with it either. He ruined everything, Margaret. He ruined me. At least now someone else can carry the weight. Margaret opened the box and pulled out the photograph, the letters, her eyes softening with recognition and grief. He loved her, she murmured. Whatever else he was, he loved her. Elaine's hands clenched into fists. He loved everyone but me. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Margaret didn't argue. She closed the box, nodded once, and stood. I'll give it to her. But you should meet her. She deserves to see who you are. Elaine shook her head violently. No, she deserves the truth, not me. I've lost enough. Without another word, she turned and walked out into the night air, her chest heavy, her hands shaking. Back home, the house was colder than ever. Daniel's absence was a wound that refused to close. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, staring out at the empty street. For the first time, she wondered if she had made the wrong choice. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe Rachel didn't deserve to pay for Thomas's sins. Maybe confronting her, acknowledging her existence, could have been a step toward healing. But Elaine couldn't summon the strength. Her anger was still too sharp, her grief too raw. A week later, Daniel appeared at her door. His face was tight, his eyes tired. He stepped inside without waiting for permission and stood in the living room, hands shoved in his pockets. I met her, he said simply. Elaine's chest clenched. Rachel. Daniel nodded. She didn't know the full story. Margaret gave her the journal, the letters. She cried, Mom. She didn't ask for any of this, but she's been living with pieces of it her whole life. She's not what you think. She's kind. She wants to understand. Elaine turned away, her throat burning. And what about you? Do you want her? Daniel hesitated. She's my sister, Mom. I can't pretend she's not. I won't replace you, but I can't erase her either. Silence stretched between them, heavy and final. Elaine's hands trembled as she gripped the back of a chair. So you've chosen. Daniel's voice softened. No, I'm choosing both. If you can't accept her, that's on you. But I won't cut her out of my life just because Dad lied. Elaine's tears finally broke free, hot and bitter. She sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands. Daniel stood frozen for a long moment before quietly leaving again. The slam of the door echoed like a gavel. Elaine was alone. Days turned into weeks, the house a mausoleum of memories. She avoided town, avoided church, avoided anyone who might ask questions she couldn't bear to answer. But inside her, something shifted. For the first time, she felt not just grief or rage, but a hollow ache of inevitability. The truth was out. Her husband's lies were no longer secrets buried in a journal. They were living things now, embodied in a daughter who carried his blood and her son's reluctant loyalty. Nothing she did could bury that again. One evening, as autumn winds rattled the windows, Elaine sat at the table and wrote a letter. Not to Margaret, not to Rachel, but to Daniel. She poured out her heart, the betrayal, the humiliation, the unbearable weight of discovering she had shared her husband all those years. She confessed her weakness, her fear of being replaced, her terror of losing the one person who anchored her to the world. I don't know if I can accept her, she wrote. But I want to accept you, always. Even if I am broken, even if I can never forgive him, I hope you can forgive me. She sealed the letter and left it on the counter, unsure if she would ever give it to him. That night, she dreamed of Thomas, his face blurred, his voice calling her name from a distance she could never cross. When she woke, she sat in silence, realizing that forgiveness, for him, for herself, perhaps even for Rachel, might never come. But she also understood something she hadn't before. The truth would live on whether she fought it or not. It was no longer hers to control. The journal had destroyed her illusions, fractured her family, and left her standing in ruins. But in those ruins, Daniel had found a sister, Rachel had found her father's legacy, and even Margaret had found the chance to stop hiding. Elaine had only emptiness. Yet emptiness was also freedom. As she watched the dawn creep through the curtains, Elaine whispered into the quiet house, "It's over." She didn't know if she believed it, but it was all she had left.